This is how to fetch data in JavaScript, so let's go. Fetching data might sound complicated, but it's actually very simple when you think about it. It is just getting the information from somewhere like an API endpoint, then using it in your code. This is how it works. There's frontend and there's backend. In this case, the backend is the API endpoint. The API endpoint can contain the data about something that you want to display, or it can also contain the codes that can be executed after fetching it, such as getting data from the database. When you fetch data from the front end, think of it like a hand reaching out to the API endpoint, grabbing the data in there, usually in the form of JSON, then coming back to the front end to display or execute the data. That's literally it. In normal JavaScript, there are typically 7 steps to do this. Setting up the HTML page, getting the elements from the HTML to the JavaScript, fetching data from the API endpoint, converting the fetched data into JSON, checking the data to see what's inside, and updating the element with the fetched data. I'm going to break down how to fetch the data step by step using a weather app example. Step 1. Setting up the HTML. First, we have a simple web page with a button to trigger the data fetch, a div to display the weather icon, and 2 paragraphs to show the weather condition and temperature. Step 2. Getting the elements from the HTML. Before we do anything, we grab the elements that we need. In this case, is the image of the weather, the condition description, and the temperature. We will update them later after we get the data later on. Step 3. Fetching data from the API. Next, for the data function, when the button is clicked, this function will fetch data and display it. I made it an async function as await will be used later on. This is to ensure that the line with the await will be fully executed finished before moving on to the next line. In this case, it's to ensure that the data is fully fetched and there will actually be data to be used. So in the weather app example, in the function, first we get the weather data. Fetch makes a request to the API endpoint. Different API points have different URLs and parameters, so you will need to check the documentation. In this case, the URL of the weather API is in the API Explorer page of this documentation. Since fetching takes time, we use await to wait for the response before moving on. Step 4. Converting the response to JSON. The response we get isn't immediately useful, it's currently in the form of JSON. So on our side, we need to convert it to match the response format. Again, this takes time, so we await it. Step 5. Checking the data. Before using the data, it's a good practice to log it into the console to see what is inside. This helps us to find the exact path to the information that we need. So in this case, this is what the data will look like in the console. Opening up one arrow is like opening up one path. Step 6. Displaying the data. After fetching the data, it's time to play with it, aka display it. The first thing that I want to display is the weather icon. But where is it? Good question. The icon is inside the data.current.condition.icon. As we need to open up the current path, then open up the condition path to find the icon. To display it, we create an image element and set its source to the icon's URL using DOM manipulation. The icon URL is basically the data.current.condition.icon because this is the URL in the console. And then lastly, add the image to our page inside the div with the ID of image contain. Now let's update the text inside the paragraph elements to display the weather condition. The text of the condition is inside data.current.condition.text. We need to open up the current path, then open up the condition path to find the text. The text of the temperature in degrees is inside data.current.temperature_c. We need to open up the current path to find the temperature. We then show the weather condition such as sunny and the temperature such as 30 degrees Celsius by updating the text content of the p-text using DOM manipulation. That's it! Now when you press the button, the page updates with the latest weather data. In regular HTML, CSS or JavaScript, when you fetch the data, it is from an external API just like what we have done just now. But in full stack, you need to define the endpoints yourself in the backend. Then the frontend fetches this custom endpoint instead of an external API. This custom endpoint can be an executable function such as getting the data from the database and authentication, for example. But the steps for fetching data in full stack is similar to what I've taught earlier. Step 1. Set up the backend, like an API endpoints with functionality and the database. Step 2. Set up the frontend. Step 3. In the frontend, fetch the data from the backend. Step 4. Convert the fetched data into JSON. Step 5. Checking the data to see what's inside. And Step 6. Doing whatever you want with the data in the frontend, like displaying them. I've talked about this in one of my earlier videos, to check it out. So yeah, this is how you fetch data. Anyways, that's my opinion. Bye.